Yo, welcome to my Summer Lair. I'm your host, Sammy Younan. Thank you, John Walker, for being here.
My pleasure.
You have a documentary out now about assholes theory.
Yeah.
And you've been traveling with this documentary from Vancouver to New Zealand. So kind of pick up a thread from your documentary. Are you noticing that there are assholes everywhere? Is that a consistent theme?
Yes, there are assholes. Some countries and some cultures, business cultures and so on, can be cultures that reward this behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Others are less likely to. So there's a certain cultural aspect to it. It is about culture and breeding and upbringing and so on. Aaron wrote on page 101, which is the first page I opened when I first picked up the book, that if a young boy was born in United States, Italy, or Israel, he is far more likely to live the life of an asshole than if he was born in Norway, Japan, or Canada.
Right.
So I found that interesting. That's why I picked up the book. I thought, it's a cultural thing. So yeah, so it's cultural, and certain cultures, very individualistic cultures, promote and reward this kind of behavior.
Yeah, because you highlight in the documentary like the difference between like a Canadian asshole and like I guess a traditional asshole.
Yeah.
Is that the
Well, the word asshole, interestingly, it did come out of the American lexicon. It started being used in the after the Second World War. It was arsehole, and there were different words that were being used to describe superior officers. So it came out of a kind of a working class culture in that sense, and it started to come into, they used to be in the 40s and earlier, you were a cad, and different words to describe this type of character. But Norman Mailer was the first to use it in his novel in the 1950s, and now it's used in every script in Hollywood. The characters use the word. So it's coming. So it is an American word, and it translates into other countries. In Italy, it's stronzi, and different cultures have. In Quebec, it's trucu, and trucu. So anyway, different people have different. But it is essentially an American term.
Yeah, so you mentioned the book. I know you've already done a number of interviews and kind of rehashed this already, but just for people who don't know, you went into the bookstore, as the documentary says, and you found this really interesting book.
Yeah, well, I had a conversation with a female colleague, and I think women tend to ask this question more than men. Do you have to be an asshole to be a great filmmaker, architect, whatever? It could be a business person, whatever.
The Steve Jobs business model, basically.
Exactly. Yes. And he was rewarded for his behavior, and we do deal with Silicon Valley, and so it's we had a big audience. It was snowing last night, and they all stayed. I mean, 98 Rogers Hot Dogs Cinema on Bloor Street, and for 95% of the people stay for Q&A, which is rare. Usually, it's half the audience leaves or more, and the keeners stay. But here, it's like everybody. Because everyone can relate to this story. I mean, everyone's had to deal with this type of behavior in their lives, whether it's a boyfriend or father or a boss. And also, there is this zeitgeist now of what's going on south of our border, and in media and in the culture and Facebook. Social media is enlarging and amplifying this kind of behavior. So it's disturbing. People are disturbed by this behavior, and what's great about the book and what we carry through into the film is defining this character, defining the word in a sense. And what Aaron has done is that he lets us know that this is not a word that one should use to describe someone you don't like.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, it's not like a swear word,
Yeah.
He's defined a moral character. It's a type, somebody with an entrenched sense of entitlement, somebody who feels that he deserves special advantages because of this entitlement, and unwilling to listen to complaints of others, and so that's a very clear definition. So, you have to be very careful who you call, you define as this type of moral character.
Yeah, I found that was kind of interesting, the fact that you had this clear definition of it, right? Because sometimes, I know it's mainly a guy thing, but sometimes we'll call other people like a bitch or something like that.
Yeah.
And that's what you're kind of talking about, right? Which is just a swear word or something that's kind of dismissive.
Yes.
But it doesn't quite have the same impact or the same nuance of what you're talking about. That sense of entitlement, that narcissism, that like I'm more important than you are.
That's right. Yeah. And you're not important at all. You don't even exist as a person. So yeah, it's a very, very useful definition. It's an interesting way to look at a culture, our culture, look at history. There are characters in history that we would define as asshole. I mean, in discussions, we didn't go into this in the film, but British imperialism, sense of entitlement and taking over India and all the countries and dominating the world, the American manifest destiny of the 19th century, that they were going to have North America was their territory, and so on. So all of these things of Napoleon would have been called an asshole in his day, So it's an interesting way to look at history. Also, what I really liked about it was that it's nonpartisan. No matter where you sit on the political spectrum, you can behave badly. So it's not. This is not just a left liberal point of view here. He's a moral philosopher. It's moral philosophy.
You are also differentiating between like bad behavior or a bad day versus being like an asshole is more consistent. I guess is the
exactly. So one example, and on our birthdays. We have a sense of entitlement. We want to have our cake and eat it too, right? And our friends and family buy into this because they too will have their day in the sun. So we accept this. For the asshole, it's his birthday every day.
Yes.
Right? And I think so that's the proper asshole. So,
right.
We all have an inner asshole, as it were. It's a funny term, but that Aaron used, inner asshole. But, in biblical terms, we can talk about good and evil, right? So we all have the potential for this behavior. This is not something unique to a species or a class or race or anything. It's human behavior. We're all capable of it, and it's a question of have we pushed back against it? I mean, we show in the film that toddlers are me, biting and kicking, and I want this, and it's they're just centered on themselves. We train them not to be that way. Teenagers explore this sense of entitlement. Fair enough. They're exploring. And we try to train them out of it or to repress this side of their nature. So, it's a matter of finding that equilibrium. We can all behave badly in a certain situation, but to be a bona fide everyday asshole, we need to push back against that.
Yeah, and it's an interesting balance because you already touched upon the fact that it's cultural, but at the same time, we kind of not just reward asshole behavior, but we also kind of like applaud the people that like speak their mind and like go a little bit outside of the nonconformity, right? Vanguards and like iconoclasts and things like that. So it's like, how do we balance then like this? Because we won't progress necessarily, right? If people like just all follow the same line.
Yeah. I mean, again, somebody is just, speaking out against your actions, and that person could be on the left or the right speaking out against some, So they're not necessarily an asshole behavior. They're not necessarily acting out of a sense of entitlement. They just have an opinion that you may not agree with, right? And that's not assholery, But it can veer into that. It can veer into it in not willing to listen to the other's point of view, and just being very entrenched in your point of view and feeling you're right and everybody else is wrong, and that's kind of and that's happening more and more in media.
The us versus them.
Us versus them, yeah, and that's very problematic. Not having conversations anymore, and partly I think is that here we are sitting down here, face to face. We get the vibes. We feel, I get looking at you as a nice, honest face.
Yes, thank you.
But and I can trust you, and I can say, but I can see you're not aggressive. I can see you don't have an agenda, trying to pin me down into a particular thing. Whereas if you're divorced from that on social media, you don't see the faces, and it's much easier to be, haters and to be negative and nasty to each other.
Does also like that agenda that you're talking about, that social agenda, does that feed from also political correctness? Does that feed into it as well? Because it's like kind of trying to police that type of behavior.
Yeah, that's a very the political correctness is a very complicated state of affairs that we're in right now, and the free speech. Issues of free speech, liberty, freedom of expression. Canada has more limitations on hate speech than the U.S., for example.
Correct.
So we are different in that way, but the nuances are in the various cultures and countries how they view this history. And the culture. So, it can like anything, it can go over the top. And not have a balance to it. It's similar to the point of view of the book and my reading of his book, and carried that through to the film, is that, we're not going to get rid of this behavior, but it's a matter of equilibrium. It's a matter of having a balance, finding that balance in ourselves and in the culture. And it's when assholery is dominating and taking over, and it becomes toxic in an environment, whether it's an institution or in the home or in the office place. It's dominating. That's when it's a problem. So it's, I feel that we're not going to change necessarily the assholes who are hardcore assholes that, have gone through the teenage years and now working have been rewarded. You're not going to change them, but you can change your children. You can change teenagers. You can, not support fraternities and the universities that we talk about, the misogyny that goes on there and so on and so forth. So we have to temper and push back and try to find that balance.
Yeah, you talk about it towards the end of the movie, civility.
Yeah.
Right? And is that also kind of like a casualty now? Because like you're saying, like there's a growth of like assholery.
Yes.
So civility, I guess, a casualty now.
Absolutely, and it's being driven. I mean, it started. Well, you can go way back, I guess, in history. I mean, the muckraking in newspapers. So newspapers, radio, and then the radio hosts that are, and private radio trying to get callers and so on. So, that kind of nastiness is it grew out of the media. Social media is just giving more people access to this kind of behavior. It used to be, a radio host and whoever they were talking to, and now it's anybody could be a radio host and anybody can spew off, this disgusting language and hatred on the internet, and it gets enlarged, and they get followers.
Yeah, so you build a tribe, basically.
You build a tribe, and that's what's dangerous, and that's unique. That's something new. And then there's the dark web and all of the, percussion.
But I think that's one of the themes of the documentary and the book too, is just that the idea of being entrenched, because it's like, especially with social media, once you build your tribe or your community, it becomes very much us against them, and it becomes much more harder to see something outside of it or to have a reasoned or nuanced take on anything.
Yeah, and this is why we're critical of the companies that are producing social media, because the algorithms we're not necessarily creating our own little silo. The algorithms are doing that. I'm only getting stuff on my so-called news feed from Facebook of things that they think I'm interested in, which is a very narrow view. I want to know what other people are thinking outside of my interests, but I'm not getting that. So I'm being put into a silo, and
the algorithm's an asshole then.
In a sense. Well, the engineer that produced the algorithm to do that is the asshole. Is assholery. And Leslie Miley, who was in our film, African American, who was a lead engineer at Google, Facebook, all these companies, pushed back against designing this kind of software. He was asked to it's not in the film, but he was asked to do a software that would racially profile people. And the company said it's so we can have diversity in the company. He says, no way. That will be misused. Are you kidding me? I'm African American. I have to deal with this every day. And he pushed back, and it was a huge. He ended up leaving, and it was a big fuss made, and it went viral. His whole resistance to that. So, the engineers have to say, no, this is not right.
We're talking about like very negative consequences, obviously, but you take a very humorous tone. Like, yes. I don't want to lose that element of it too, right?
No, exactly.
So how did you kind of decide that, even though this is a quote unquote a serious topic?
Yes, So we Aaron is as I say, is a PhD scholar, moral philosopher. It's a serious book on moral philosophy, but he has a great sense of humor, and in the book. And so we picked up on that. I mean, as we say in the book, there's varying degrees of assholes. You've got an asshole that's running a country, or you've got, the asshole in his BMW that's cutting in front of you on the street. I mean, he's not a, major. So there's a whole kinds of degrees, right? And as John Cleese says, the actor and writer, comedian,
Monty Python.
He says that these characters, in movies and so on, we can laugh at them because it's not real, and but you wouldn't want to live necessarily with these characters. But so we can laugh at them. They do bring our attention. We show their attractiveness. The other thing we point out that, we use the example of a hockey player like Marchand, who's is an asshole on the ice, and some say off the ice. But if he's scoring goals for your team,
he's good.
He's a good guy.
Right.
If he's scoring goals against your team, then you're going to call him he's an asshole.
Right.
Right. So this is the problem. If assholes are making money for us, making good investments, making money, if they're running our companies, and we don't push back, and we don't say anything about it. So that's a danger, and they can be funny. They can be there's the ass clown. There's one of the assholes in Aaron's book. The ass clown and so on. which was sort of Ford was a bit of an ass clown.
Yeah.
Yeah. He wasn't seriously bad. He was just sort of a bumbling sort of, So anyway, there's various degrees. So they can be funny. They grab our attention, and sometimes they can be entertaining.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think that's one of the points that you're making is that you can laugh like some of the Monty Python stuff, and you had a sketch in there where John Cleese was being really obnoxious and kind of basically being an asshole. But it's because we all have an inner asshole, right? Which is part of what you're saying. Like it's a choice. Some of us have a choice to make, and we don't always choose right. Is kind of what you're saying, right?
Yes, that's right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because when I read the book, when you read it, you have to ask yourself, have I ever been an asshole, and or have I ever had a sense of entitlement? And the answer was yes. Not on a daily basis, but certainly I've been there. So, we all have the potential.
Yeah. How did you decide, or how did John Cleese come into the project?
So I when we were doing our research, I was interested in people that were affected by the book. So Soderbergh, he had an epiphany when he read the book, and he quit making films in Hollywood. He says, I realize I'm dealing with assholes, and I'm not making films anymore.
Right.
Bette Midler was another one who had an epiphany and wrote about it, and John Cleese tweeted about it. So we were initially in contact with Soderbergh and Bette Midler, but their schedules didn't allow for it. But Cleese was for it. He liked the book, and he liked the take that I was taking in the film. So we really hit it off, and he's been a big supporter of the film. Yeah.
That also seems to be something interesting as well, which is like a kind of delayed reaction. Like people are like in Hollywood, or like you said, like you had the Google example where somebody's working, and then it's like there seems to be a breaking point or recognition of the assholery that's going on. Whereas almost people like kind of go into Hollywood or something, kind of just accept what it is at first, and then they kind of have the epiphany. Is that
right? Well, that's what seemed to happen to Soderbergh in that case. Yeah, reading the book, because that's the thing that Aaron defines this behavior. So when you start recognizing, oh, wait a minute, because it's very easy if you're being treated badly by a boss, to think, oh, what am I doing wrong? You're the victim of this, and you go, oh, maybe I'm not working hard enough. I'm like, why am I being treated badly? And so you can push that on yourself. If you realize, no, wait a minute, this is asshole behavior. This is not acceptable behavior. We've defined that as not acceptable. You go, well, this is not acceptable, and you'll do something about it. You'll either leave the job or so on and so forth. So, there's various strategies that one should do if you realize you're in the presence of and working for an asshole. We talk about that in the film.
Yeah. And you feel, just kind of picking up on that thread of going back to civility, you feel like there isn't a point of no return, that we can, like you said, like we can kind of start to train the next generation. There isn't a point of no return where we can inject civility back into our culture. Yeah, well,
the example that Baird has, they've introduced a no asshole rule. Like they won't hire assholes, and they say when they're sitting at the boardroom table interviewing you, if you're an asshole and we hire you and we find out, you're gone. Yes. So don't bother applying.
Yeah.
And Baird says in the film, Joe, yes, you are a very, very special person, and you're so special, I think you should work somewhere else. And people cheer you, he said, when you say that, So they've created an environment where they're not dealing with assholes. The toxic nature of working for assholes. So we deal with that with Sherry Benson Podolchuk, the former RCMP officer, and the toxicity. She got to the point of wanting to commit suicide, and mentions that others have committed suicide from being treated badly, mistreated. So this is a serious business. She fought back. She's kind of a hero in the film to me, spending all her time. And she eventually won. There's a class action suit against the RCMP for this behavior and so on and so forth. So, you can push back. It takes a toll. But the other thing that I think is really important towards the end of the film, we say, if you're seeing this behavior, don't close a blind eye to it. If a colleague is being treated badly, maybe you have a good relationship with the boss. Maybe, you're not being treated badly necessarily. But if you have a colleague that is, then it's up to you to say something, and to help that situation.
Yeah.
So don't close a blind eye to this behavior.
Because then that would just be feeding your inner asshole too then.
Feeding your inner asshole, and we want to make our society better. If you see somebody mistreating as a dog on the street, or a child, or a gay, or trans or immigrant, as Vladimir says at the end of the movie, if you see somebody and you just turn a blind eye, then you're just as bad as that person.
And so the documentary has been making the rounds now at a number of film festivals. where can people find it online or can find you online to see where the next screenings are?
Yeah, so www.assholesatheory.com is our website. So we post everything there. Right now we're running a theatrical screening in Toronto for the next 2 weeks. We're in Montreal, and we've been out west, so it's theatrical screening. And the film will be shown in January on the documentary channel, and then after that it will be available online down the road.
Is it still a theory? I know that's the title, but it's kind of almost confirmed now, isn't it? Or
yes. So yeah, the book is Assholes the Theory. So and the theory is he gets into philosophy of I sort of jumped from. I got the theory and the definition, and I went to the reality. So the documentary is testing these theories not theories, a theory.
Mm-hmm.
The a theory is it's a moral character, So that's the setup, and so I took that premise and took it out into the workplace, as it were, into the real world as a documentarian, and said, well, is this what's the deal out in the world?
Mm-hmm.
Is this just a theory? And no, it's not a theory.
Yes,
There's someone in the beginning. Oh, it's not just a theory; it's just reality.
Mm-hmm.
Streeter that we do, the guy says, not a reality. It's not a theory, it's a reality. So that's kind of what the premise of the film is. It's not a theory, it's a reality.
And it's interesting, too, because you had a number of, younger men, probably about late teens, early 20s or so, and they were very proud of being
behaving badly. Yeah. I mean, they saw it as an advantage. I mean, they were, predominantly, their lives are being filtered through social media. And when they act badly, they get lots of clicks. And they get attention, and so they're measuring their success by how many clicks they're getting, how many friends they're getting, and that's kind of a sad commentary. And they feel that to get ahead, you have to be an asshole. So they're believing that you have to be an asshole to be successful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which makes this documentary really timely because, like you said, we're just not dealing with the tyranny of assholery right now. But at the same time, it's because we're dealing with all this social media and all these media questions in general too, of how we're being divided and kind of categorized and siloed.
Yeah.
So it can be very difficult to maintain that kind of integrity or that lack of assholery.
Well, it is in the sense, I asked a lot of those young guys in LA, if they had any favorite assholes, and Kanye West came up,
Mm-hmm.
a whole bunch of them say Kanye West, he says what he wants, and he's very successul, but shaking hands with Trump and all this stuff, so they see that and they think, well, that's the way to the top,
All right. Do you have a follow-up project in mind, or have you started thinking about something?
No, I've always got projects that are percolating some of them are percolating for years.
Mm-hmm.
My last film, Quebec, My Country, Mon Pays, was about growing up in Quebec through that quiet revolution, the bombs, and so that was a film I wanted to make for many years. So I've got a number of issues that percolating. A lot of my films are based on past experiences and lived experiences. Ironically, this is sort of a departure for me because I didn't really grow up with assholes. I didn't have to. In the film business, yes, you come across assholes. I've had to deal with them, but I basically have been operating on a no asshole rule. I don't work with assholes, and I avoid them. But there's not a lot of this behavior, in the documentary
Mm-hmm.
genre in Canada. It's we're a pretty tame group in terms of behavior.
Very benevolent group too.
Yeah, we're sort of more we're like poets and jazz musicians. We're not wealthy,
Mm-hmm.
entitled, stars.
Yeah. You like the documentary genre, I guess, right?
Yes, I do, because it. I feel that I'm just furthering my education since I stopped studying. I realize I've sort of been educated through oral culture, oral tradition. My grandmothers knew their history, Scottish, Irish history, linked me up to the whole pre-Christian mythology of the culture and sense of history. And so I've sort of continued. I've always loved talking to elders, and so I've just continued that. When I look back on my experience of talking to people who survived the Stalin period, who sent off to the Gulag, people who survived the Holocaust, First Nations, surviving horrors of colonialism in Canada, and all of these experiences. I've been to Papua New Guinea and tribal cultures, oral cultures in Canada, the Inuit and Arctic. And what an education, and these are people that are have suffered much worse things that I have ever suffered or whatever, and they're smarter than I am, and so on. So it's just I feel very, very privileged to be able to travel around and speak to people and learn about the world. And so it's a process of learning, and I'm just sharing what I'm learning with the audience about these various different subjects and cultures and people. And it's a very privileged role, and with it, of course, comes a responsibility not to exploit the people that you're involving in your film.
Yeah, it's a very difficult balance, right?
It is, yeah. I mean, you have to be. It's a fine line, that you're not just exploiting people for your own purposes,
And that's what I kind of like about documentary, because you get this window into a world, either like a group of First Nations that have suffered, or assholes, or whatever it is, that you because we kind of picked up in that thread that the media sometimes kind of silos us, right? So you don't get a lot of like quote unquote nutrition. It's just junk food. From a lot of the media, the newspapers, and things you consume. But with the documentary, you're sitting down with the subject, and if they've done the documentary well, you get a 2-hour window of like well-researched, like investigative journalism, the stuff that we're kind of all missing now from our diet.
Yes, that's right. And I try to be very personal in my film. This is from my point of view. The Quebec film was my experience, my point of view. So you can disagree with me in a personal film, but not trying for objectivity, because objectivity lends you to think that, well, this is it, So I like to have that sort of look at the gray areas and let an audience make up their own decisions about things. I'm presenting different sides often of things, and let them. So I'm not trying to
spoon feed them almost.
Not spoon feed. Yeah. So I like people to come to their own conclusions in the end. I don't really have big conclusions at the end of the film. It's just here's this journey we've been on. What do you think? So I see documentary very much. It's about conversation. It's about this is a documentary process. It's an oral cultural exchange we're having here. And so a film is like that. I sit down with people, I have conversations. It transfers into the film. I learn things. I bring that into the film. And then when you show a film, I want that conversation to continue. And that's happening with the Asshole film. We sit down, and 90% of people are staying in the audience. They want to continue talking about it.
Yeah, you become like an asshole therapist or something.
Well, I wouldn't say therapist. My daughter's going into that field, but but it's just to have conversations open and and not one-sided conversations, and that's what I think what documentary can do. It can fall into propaganda. I mean, Leni Riefenstahl, the Nazi, triumph of the will was propaganda, trying to influence public opinion, and there is that side of documentary. It can be used for propagandic purposes, and so that's not where I'm coming from, but it can be used. So it is potentially a dangerous medium in that sense.
All right, we'll leave it there. So your documentary right now, Assholes, a Theory, is, like you said, playing right now at the Hot Docs Bloor Cinema for the next 2 weeks.
It's going to be just a week at the cinema on Bloor, and then it's going to Carlton Cinemas next week.
Carlton, thank you for correcting me. Yeah. Are you going to do any more Q&As, or are you going to?
No, probably not. Not any of the commercial releases. I'm done. I did one here, one in Montreal, and West, and so I'm done doing the Q&As. Yeah.
Cool.
But there will be public screenings. Other libraries and different getting invited to different places to screen, not the commercial release. Yeah.
It's incredible when you make a documentary, the places you end up in, isn't it?
That's what I love about it. Yeah, and I love people. Yeah, I love sitting down about people, and I
good
like
people, obviously.
Yes, but also I mean, I didn't want to interview assholes. I didn't really want to talk to assholes. I mean, I know what they're like, and I didn't have any interest. If you said, I can have an interview with whoever, no, I'm not really interested. But I do like having conversations with people who have a completely different opinion than I have, say, about politics. Somebody who's on the right or whatever it is. I'm interested in having conversations with those people and anybody, because you learn something. And I think that's important, that there's often common ground that you didn't realize there was common ground. And that's what we have to start working on. Well, what's the common ground in our differences,
Well, because that's the death of empathy, right? Once you become it's us versus them, or we're right and you guys are wrong.
That's right. Yeah.
Then you've lost empathy, right? And that's kind of what you're talking about at the end of the documentary with civility, which is like we get to carry each other, we get to help each other, right? It's an opportunity. It's not a demand or an obligation, right?
And I've learned it in terms of friendship, is that I leave politics out of friendship. If somebody has a different political view, then I can still be a friend. I don't let it influence the friendship. Even if I disagree politically, we're still friends.
All right. That's a positive note. We should end it there. So thank you, John Walker, for the documentary. And I'll put the link on for people where they can kind of see the movie. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, that was fun. The documentary is Assholes, a theory directed by my guest John Walker, and it's based on the 2012 book also called Assholes, a Theory by Aaron James, a professor of philosophy at the University of California, Irvine. I didn't bring it up in the interview, but I wondered about the loophole. The loophole is if you can't feel shame, you can't be shamed. I was finally able to articulate that simple idea after I read So You've Been Publicly Shamed by John Ronson. It was published March 9, 2015. Public shaming is part of the asshole culture we participate in. There's a big difference in berating an able-bodied person for using a handicapped spot to run into the store and get Pop-Tarts and like offensive tweets. Following Ronson's book, I concluded shame is lame. Shame doesn't work if you don't have the authority, if you don't have the respect and the weight to effectively trigger a sense of remorse or even guilt. It's like trying to discipline somebody else's child. It just doesn't work. There's no value in labeling politicians or celebrities assholes. They're often in their own media bubble, and it's rarely for their own betterment. It's kind of a narcissistic thing that we do sometimes. Really, the responsibility belongs to the people who know them well, who know the facts. And of course, watching Assholes a Theory, I thought about myself, which is also the whole point of the doc. Am I an asshole? It's a valid question and it's worth asking. However, and hopefully, I'm not alone. You thought about it too, about yourself and some of the things you've done, some of your behavior. It's not like I'm the only one who's been a jerk face. And the thing is, the longer you live on this planet, the more time you've had to be a jerk face. The thought is disturbing because it's true. It requires a pen and paper and a seriously serious tea to work all through that out. For now, I enjoyed watching Assholes of Theory. I smiled because it's got John Cleese, so that alone is worth the price of admission. So go. If there's a screening near you, go. If it's floating around on TV, check it out. In the meantime, if you have asshole thoughts and feelings, hit me up on social media, My Pal Sammy for all three, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Simplified your life. Assholes, yo.